The first warning isn't a siren. It isn't an explosion. It's silence. Sudden, unnatural, absolute. A fraction of a second where the world seems to pause, as if reality itself has taken a breath it cannot release. At 7:33 a.m., commuters speeding down the freeway notice something impossible unfolding on the city's horizon. A bloom of blinding white light erupts across the skyline, brighter than the sun, swallowing shape and shadow alike. For those within its reach, vision collapses into pure radiance. Then, just as suddenly, darkness follows. Eyes blink, but the world remains burned into their retinas. A ghostly afterimage of a city that no longer exists. Streetlights that have never failed flicker once, then die in sequence like falling dominoes. Electricity stutters across the grid, struggling for life before collapsing completely. Phones resting in hands and pockets power down forever, their screens fading into lifeless black. Car radios crackle sharply, releasing one final burst of static before surrendering to silence. The electromagnetic pulse moves unseen yet unstoppable, a wave of invisible force that overloads every circuit, every system, every piece of technology it touches. Above the city, vapor trails from interceptor jets carve desperate arcs across the sky, fading as quickly as the normal morning that existed moments ago. Closest to ground zero, the city transforms into something unrecognizable in less than 30 seconds. The nuclear flash spreads outward like a disk of pure energy pressed against the sky, existing for barely a heartbeat, yet long enough to ignite skin and clothing at distances that defy comprehension. At 5 miles, the line between second and third degree burns becomes terrifyingly real. At 7 miles, people collapse, overwhelmed by heat they cannot understand, feeling pain unlike anything they have ever experienced. Then the blast arrives. Windows explode outward from skyscrapers in shimmering storms of glass. Steel structures twist like soft wire. Brick buildings shatter, their fragments hurled through the air like toys. The atmosphere itself becomes a weapon, driven outward with a force greater than the strongest hurricane ever recorded. In offices, kitchens, and crowded shops, human bodies are thrown violently against walls. Bones splinter instantly. Lives end before minds can even comprehend what has happened. Within 2 miles of the detonation, nothing human survives. At 4 miles, survival becomes a matter of inches, a cruel lottery decided by walls, shadows, and chance. Fires ignite everywhere at once. Wood, fuel, fabric, plastic, all erupt into flame under the overwhelming heat. The city becomes an ocean of fire. Those who can still move run without thinking, guided by instincts older than language itself. They flee from the heat, from the screams, from the collapsing structures around them. Some drag injured strangers through rubble. Others clutch children or elderly parents, stumbling through smoke-choked streets. Behind them, flames roar with a living hunger, devouring everything in their path. Within minutes, the familiar outline of the city is erased, rewritten in ash, dust, and fire. At the edges of the blast zone, survivors emerge from shattered buildings into a world both recognizable and utterly alien. A city bus lies overturned, its windows shattered, passengers trapped inside crying for help. Entire neighborhoods burn unchecked, their lawns already coated with drifting ash. The air tastes of chemicals and destruction. No one speaks calmly. No one thinks clearly. Every movement is automatic, driven by shock and primal fear. Information vanishes. Power is gone. Communication collapses entirely. Hundreds of thousands of phone calls, text messages, desperate pleas for help, all lost in networks reduced to fried circuitry. The modern world, built on connection, has been severed in an instant. Wealth, status, technology, none of it matters now. High-rise executives and suburban families share the same confusion, the same terror, the same fragile distance from death. Far beyond the devastation, in shielded command centers, a radio operator finally activates the emergency broadcast system. 7 minutes pass, an eternity, before the first clear message reaches regions still connected to the grid. Take cover. Stay inside. This is not a drill. 90 seconds. That is all it took for ordinary life to collapse into chaos. Across cities and suburbs, in homes and highways, silence replaces certainty. No one knows whether the explosion was a single strike or the opening move of a greater catastrophe. The question lingers in every mind. If given only seconds, would you run, freeze, or search for the people you love? But the destruction is far from over. Above the ruined city, a massive mushroom cloud rises into the sky, pulling thousands of tons of debris upward. Dust, asphalt, paper, fragments of steel, and traces of human life. In response, powerful winds surge inward toward ground zero, dragging smoke and debris back into the heart of destruction. Anything still standing, signs, towers, flagpoles bends toward this new center of gravity, as if the world itself has shifted. 15, 25, even 30 miles away, daylight changes into something unfamiliar. The sky takes on a sickly hue, colors fade into pale shades of yellow and gray. Buildings reveal hidden weaknesses as cracks spread across their surfaces like veins. Trees stand stripped and broken, bark torn away, branches scattered across silent streets. Then the fallout begins. It arrives quietly, fine particles drifting through the air, settling on windowsills and clothing like harmless dust. Black specks cling to hair and skin. It does not burn. It does not sting. It feels like ordinary dirt, easily brushed aside. Yet within these particles lies invisible radiation powerful enough to destroy the human body from within. Its danger comes without warning, a silent storm of energy that penetrates flesh and bone. Inside shelters, time becomes the only measure of survival. Science predicts that most radiation danger fades within 7 hours, but the world above remains deadly. Buildings are poorly sealed, windows are shattered, basements flood. Protection is never certain. Hospitals, overwhelmed and crippled, operate on pure instinct. Corridors fill with the injured. Blood mixes with smoke and sweat. Without electricity, medical staff treat wounds under dim flashlight beams, manually pumping oxygen into failing lungs. The situation grows desperate. Most medical personnel never arrive, lost, injured, or dead. Those who remain work without supplies, without clean water, without rest. The emergency broadcast repeats endlessly through static-filled radios. A cold voice instructs survivors to shelter underground, to find thick walls and earth for protection. Tens of thousands crowd into basements, subway tunnels, and parking garages. Strangers huddle together in darkness, separated from survival by nothing more than chance. Government response, carefully planned in theoretical drills and simulations, struggles against reality. Evacuation routes are blocked by collapsed bridges and abandoned vehicles. Emergency services run out of fuel. Communication networks remain crippled. In suburban areas, panic chokes the highways as families attempt to flee an enemy that cannot be outrun, radiation carried silently by the wind. And as fear spreads faster than the fallout itself, one terrible truth becomes clear. This was not the end of the disaster. It was only the beginning. Officials know better than to promise hope they cannot deliver. They understand the brutal mathematics of catastrophe. Emergency stockpiles, once believed sufficient, can sustain only a small fraction of the population, and only for a handful of days. Maps and borders no longer matter. State lines, jurisdictions, authority all meaningless against destruction on this scale. By midday, every hospital south of the blast zone begins turning away new arrivals. The injured still come, carried by desperate relatives, dragged on makeshift stretchers, walking through pain no human body was meant to endure. But there is simply no room, no medicine, no time. Over emergency radio frequencies, the truth becomes unavoidable. Help is not coming anytime soon. Not in hours. Not even today. At best, 72 hours. If all you had was a repeating warning and the knowledge that you were completely on your own, who would you trust beside you in the dark? 6 hours after the detonation, the world above ground continues to transform into something unrecognizable. Dust settles into every low place, gathering on abandoned cars, creeping through broken windows, drifting slowly into basements with each movement of air. Streets that once roared with traffic and conversation now lie silent, empty, haunted. Most survivors have retreated underground, guided by a simple and terrifying truth. Concrete and earth mean survival. Exposure means death. In this new reality, survival becomes a matter of numbers and calculation. The human body requires water, at least a gallon per day, more under stress. Yet the water flowing from taps can no longer be trusted. Pipes have shattered beneath the shockwave. Fallout contaminates reservoirs. Even the most basic necessity has become a potential poison. Food, once taken for granted, becomes precious within hours. Refrigerators grow warm without electricity, their contents spoiling. Pantry shelves that once held forgotten cans now represent the fragile barrier between security and starvation. Children sense the fear in adult voices and begin to cry, confused by a danger they cannot understand. Neighbors who had never exchanged a greeting now sit shoulder to shoulder in dimly lit basements, sharing flashlights and dividing cans of soup with quiet desperation. In every shelter, the same question hangs unspoken in the air. If the radiation peaks soon, will these walls be enough? Does anyone truly know what tomorrow will bring? Across the ruined city, survivors face dangers never described in survival manuals. Basement windows lie shattered, allowing contaminated air to seep inside. Families push heavy furniture against openings, stacking mattresses and boards in a desperate attempt to slow the invisible threat. Some, driven by rumor and panic, abandon their shelters in search of supplies. They emerge into streets littered with broken glass and scattered debris, chasing stories of open supermarkets that turn out to be looted wastelands. Empty shelves, overturned carts, shattered doors. Even if supplies existed, distribution has collapsed. There is no fuel, no drivers, no functioning system left to deliver aid. Every intersection now represents a crossing point between the familiar world and something harshly new. Trains, once the arteries of mass transportation, sit frozen on lifeless tracks. Inside the stalled carriages, passengers stare at dark phone screens, waiting for messages that will never come. Emergency responders who remain operational face unbearable decisions. With limited medical supplies, they must choose who receives treatment and who receives only pain relief. Burn dressings and antibiotics are reserved for the few most likely to survive. For many others, only morphine remains, comfort in place of cure. Hospitals descend into controlled chaos. Intravenous fluids are rationed by the hour. Hallways overflow with the wounded. Walkie-talkies crackle with clipped messages. No capacity, critical only. Triage at entrance. Outside, shifting winds carry radioactive plumes into new neighborhoods, invisible and unpredictable. Those caught outdoors attempt to wash themselves with precious bottled water, already aware that within days every store will be empty and clean water may become deadlier than thirst. By late afternoon, survival becomes a test of endurance and morality. Long lines form outside homes rumored to possess bottled water. Rationing becomes the law of necessity, a gallon per person, no exceptions. Suburban communities with underground wells form fragile alliances, trading medicine for fuel, food for protection. But information itself has become unreliable. Rumor replaces fact. Fear replaces order. Beyond the city limits, highways stretch endlessly with abandoned vehicles. Windshields are coated in radioactive grit. Families remain trapped inside cars without fuel, listening to radiation meters beep warnings into the growing silence. Fires continue to rage unchecked across entire districts. Water pressure in hydrants has collapsed. Firefighters choose only the most critical structures to save. Hospitals, shelters, schools, leaving entire neighborhoods to burn. As evening approaches, downtown glows with an eerie orange light through thick smoke. The sky turns rust red beneath the setting sun. Ash falls softly, drifting through the air like silent snow. Inside hospitals, the disaster erases the boundary between healer and patient. Nurses collapse from exhaustion beside those they treat. Supplies vanish rapidly. Insulin, antibiotics, painkillers, even morphine nearly gone. Triage tags green, yellow, red are attached to patients faster than doctors can examine them. Survival becomes a probability rather than a promise. Government response struggles under overwhelming strain. Specialized rescue teams are stretched impossibly thin. Convoys attempting to deliver aid to shelters find thousands waiting for supplies meant for hundreds. Power grids remain crippled, their transformers permanently destroyed by the electromagnetic surge. Communication networks function only sporadically and only where backup generators still have fuel. Within neighborhoods, social order begins to fracture. Some communities organize calmly, sharing resources and maintaining discipline. Others descend into conflict as fear and desperation erode trust. The rules people once believed unbreakable begin to dissolve when children grow thirsty, and danger presses closer with each passing hour. Far from the devastation, federal command centers analyze satellite imagery, calculating survival probabilities, assigning priority zones. Aid distribution follows cold logic leadership. First, critical infrastructure second, civilians last. Evacuation requests multiply, but movement remains nearly impossible where bridges have collapsed and radiation levels remain lethal. When emergency broadcasts manage to cut through the static, their message never changes. Remain sheltered, avoid looting, endure. Night descends over a wounded city. Darkness spreads across silent streets broken only by the distant flicker of uncontrolled fires. Inside homes and shelters, families sit in shadows, counting water bottles, searching for candles, listening to the unfamiliar quiet. The constant hum of modern life engines, air conditioners, television noise has vanished, replaced by coughing, whispers, and the faint crackle of settling ash. Beneath the ground, survivors sleep in restless shifts, one eye always open, waiting for sounds that may signal danger or rescue. Above them, the world they once knew continues to burn, and the long night of survival has only just begun. In the darkness of underground shelters, voices grow quieter. Survivors speak in hushed whispers, replaying the moment everything changed. The blinding flash, the violent shockwave that threw them to the ground, the instant when the world they knew simply ceased to exist. They repeat these memories again and again, trying to make sense of the chaos, trying to convince themselves it was real. Between words, another fear lingers unspoken: the fate of loved ones across the city. No one knows who survived. No one knows if neighboring cities still stand, or if the disaster has already spread beyond the horizon. After 24 hours, the human body begins to demand what the world can no longer provide. Thirst becomes a relentless pressure, more painful than hunger, especially for the wounded whose injuries burn and swell without treatment. Children cry for water, for food, for reassurance, things their parents cannot give. The strongest among the survivors can only offer silence or empty promises, their own fear carefully hidden behind steady voices. Desperation pushes some people back into the ruined streets. Faces wrapped in scarves, skin covered by whatever protection they can find. They venture into the poisoned air searching for a working pharmacy, an untouched storage room, or a forgotten supply of bottled water missed in the chaos of the previous day. The world above ground feels alien, quiet, abandoned, and coated in a fine layer of radioactive dust that clings to every surface. In areas where shifting winds have scattered the fallout, radiation levels briefly fall. Here, small groups take dangerous chances, emerging cautiously from hiding. They place buckets beneath broken hydrants or shattered pipes, collecting thin streams of contaminated water that may still mean survival. Yet few remain outside for long. The rules of survival have become absolute. Time, distance, shielding, limit exposure, move quickly, return underground. Inside overwhelmed hospitals, a colder logic begins to govern survival. Medical staff, exhausted and running out of supplies, change their strategy. Those with little chance of recovery are quietly given comfort and eased into sleep. Those strong enough to endure are asked, sometimes ordered, to assist in caring for others. Patients become helpers, and helpers become patients in an endless cycle of exhaustion and sacrifice. Leadership focuses on surviving the first 72 hours, though even that goal feels uncertain. Every passing day brings new failures. Another power station shuts down permanently. Another communication system collapses. Electricity will not return soon, perhaps not for weeks. Financial systems vanish overnight. Credit cards and digital accounts become meaningless pieces of plastic. Entire neighborhoods revert to a primitive economy based solely on what can be carried, traded, or defended. The supply chains that once sustained millions have ceased to exist. Bread will not arrive in the morning. Gasoline will not be delivered. Medicine will not be restocked. The rhythm of modern life, built on constant delivery and endless availability, has stopped completely. When dawn finally arrives, it brings no comfort. A dim, sickly light cuts through a lingering haze that refuses to clear. Smoke from endless fires blends with drifting fallout, casting the city in a permanent twilight. The blast destroyed, the flames consumed, the radiation poisoned. But it is the silence afterward that weighs most heavily on the survivors. People awaken slowly, cautiously, taking stock of what little remains. A half-empty bottle of water, a fading flashlight battery, the quiet presence of family members who are still alive. Outside, footsteps echo across soot-covered streets where traffic once roared. Each step carries the same desperate hope that somehow the old world might return, that order might re-emerge, that normal life might begin again. But the city's clocks have all stopped. Time itself seems frozen at the moment of destruction. No one knows when, or if, they will ever start again.